White blood cell. You're a white blood cell, and your entire existence is about hunting. You drift through blood vessels and squeeze between tissue cells, constantly sampling your surroundings for anything that shouldn't be there. When you detect a bacteria or virus, you don't hesitate. You engulf it, pulling the invader inside yourself where enzymes break it down into harmless fragments. Some of your fellow white blood cells take a different approach, releasing chemical signals to call for backup or producing antibodies that tag enemies for destruction. You never stop patrolling. There's always another threat somewhere in the body. Red blood cell. You're a red blood cell, and your job is simple but non-stop. You start in the lungs where you grab oxygen molecules, binding them to hemoglobin proteins inside you. Then you're shoved into the bloodstream, squeezed through arteries that get narrower and narrower until you're sliding single file through capillaries so thin you have to fold yourself to fit. You dump your oxygen into whatever tissue needs it, muscle, brain, liver, doesn't matter, then pick up carbon dioxide waste for the return trip. Back to the lungs, release the CO2, load up oxygen again, and repeat. You'll make this loop about 1,000,000 times before you wear out. Platelet. You're a platelet, and you spend most of your time just floating along in the bloodstream doing absolutely nothing. You're basically a cell fragment, not even a whole cell, and you've got about 10 days before your body recycles you. Then one day, a blood vessel tears open and everything changes. Chemical signals flood the area, and suddenly you're sticky, clumping together with thousands of other platelets to plug the hole. You form this mesh that traps red blood cells and creates a clot, and if you do your job right, the bleeding stops in minutes. It's the only exciting thing you'll ever do. Neutrophil. You're a neutrophil, the most common white blood cell in your body, and you spend your short life patrolling for trouble. The moment bacteria show up, chemical signals pull you straight to the infection site like a homing beacon. You squeeze through blood vessel walls and chase down the invaders following their molecular trail. When you catch one, you wrap around it and pull it inside your body in a process called phagocytosis, basically eating it whole. Inside you, toxic chemicals and enzymes rip the bacterium apart until nothing's left. You might destroy dozens of bacteria in a few hours before you die yourself, leaving behind pus, which is mostly dead neutrophils that gave everything to keep you infection-free. Lymphocyte. You're a lymphocyte, one of the immune system's elite specialists. Unlike the generic soldiers that attack anything foreign, you're trained to recognize specific threats. If you're a B cell, you manufacture antibodies, custom weapons that lock onto one particular invader and market for destruction. All right. If you're a T cell, you either kill infected cells directly or coordinate the whole immune response like a battlefield commander. The remarkable thing about you is memory. Once you've fought an infection, some of your clone army stays behind for years, sometimes decades. If that same pathogen shows up again, you mobilize instantly, which is why you rarely get chickenpox twice. Monocyte. Monocytes are these big, blobby white blood cells that cruise through your bloodstream like unfinished prototypes, waiting for their real job to start. They're larger than most other blood cells, with a kidney bean-shaped nucleus and a cytoplasm packed with organelles. The interesting thing about monocytes is they don't actually do much while floating in your blood. They're just traveling, waiting for chemical signals that tell them trouble's brewing somewhere in your body. Once they get that signal, they squeeze through blood vessel walls and migrate into tissues where the real transformation happens. Depending on what signals they receive, they morph into either macrophages, which are basically cell-eating monsters that devour pathogens and debris, or dendritic cells, which capture antigens and present them to other immune cells to coordinate attacks. Eosinophil. You're an eosinophil, one of the less common white blood cells floating through the bloodstream. Your specialty is dealing with parasites, those multicellular invaders that are way too big for regular immune cells to just swallow up. When you encounter a parasitic worm or similar threat, you don't try to engulf it. Instead, you park yourself right next to the parasite's surface and dump your cargo of toxic proteins directly onto it. These proteins are nasty stuff designed to punch holes in the parasite's outer coating and basically corrode it from the outside. The problem is, you also get activated during allergic reactions where you end up causing inflammation and tissue damage, even though there's no actual parasite around. Basophil. Basophils make up less than 1% of your white blood cells, making them the rarest type in circulation. When you encounter an allergen or parasite, your job is straightforward but intense. You release histamine and other chemical mediators stored in granules inside your cell body. The moment you detect the threat, those granules rush to your surface and dump their contents into surrounding tissue. Histamine causes blood vessels to dilate and become leaky, which creates that familiar swelling and redness at infection sites. You're also calling for backup, releasing signals that attract eosinophils and other immune cells to the area. This inflammatory response can save your body from parasites, but when it misfires against harmless substances, you're the one responsible for allergic reactions. Plasma. You're the liquid part of blood, the yellowish fluid that makes up about 55% of the whole thing. You're basically water mixed with proteins, sugars, salts, hormones, and whatever else needs moving around. Red and white blood cells float in you like cargo on a river. Your main job is transportation. You carry glucose from digested food to cells that need energy, hormones from glands to their target organs, and proteins that help blood clot when there's a cut. You also haul waste products like carbon dioxide and urea to the lungs and kidneys for disposal. Without you, blood would just be a clump of cells going nowhere. Stem cell. You're tucked deep inside bone marrow, specifically in the spongy tissue at the center of large bones, like your femur or pelvis. Your job is simple but relentless. Divide and differentiate. Every day, you split into two cells. One stays behind as a stem cell like you, maintaining the population. The other becomes a progenitor cell that will eventually turn into red blood cells, white blood cells, or platelets. You're constantly receiving chemical signals from your environment telling you what the body needs most. Low oxygen, make more red blood cells. Infection detected, pump out white blood cells. You never stop working. Over an average human lifetime, you and your fellow stem cells will produce roughly half a ton of blood cells. Macrophage, you've left the bloodstream and squeezed through vessel walls to set up permanent residence in tissue. You're now a macrophage, basically a monocyte that grew up and settled down in one spot. Your job is simple but endless. Eat everything that doesn't belong. Dead cells, bacteria, viruses, random debris. You engulf it all by wrapping your cell membrane around it and pulling it inside where enzymes break it down. You're constantly extending and retracting parts of your membrane, reaching out to grab whatever looks suspicious. When you catch something nasty like a bacterial invader, you don't just destroy it silently. You chop up pieces of it and display them on your surface like trophies, basically holding up evidence to alert passing T cells that there's trouble here. Antibody. You're a Y-shaped protein floating through the bloodstream, one of millions produced by a specific B cell after it recognized something foreign. Your two arms are incredibly picky, each one built to lock onto one exact molecular pattern called an antigen, like a key that only fits one lock. When you bump into a bacterium displaying your target antigen, you latch on tight. Once attached, you mark that invader for destruction, basically painting a big target on it that screams, "Eat this," to nearby macrophages and other immune cells. Sometimes you can neutralize the threat directly by blocking the pathogen's ability to enter cells or by clumping multiple invaders together. Your lifespan is just a few weeks, but your B cell factory keeps cranking out replacements as long as the threat persists.